guys, Dakota here, and welcome back to the Driven Mad channel. So in today's video, we're taking a break from some of the off-roaders and stuff because it's been a while since the R8 has been on the channel. And we're just going to talk about kind of what it's like to actually drive one of these. And because it's my channel, I can kind of do stuff like that. So with that being said, go ahead and talk briefly about the car. This is a 2011 Audi R8, a Gen 1 Audi R8. This is the V8, or the original configuration, if you will, the 4.2 liter V8 that makes 420 horsepower. And this is also the gated 6-speed manual, as you guys can see in there. Now, they did do, when this car initially launched, you could get the gated manual, or you could get the 6-speed automated manual, the R-Tronic, but that transmission is definitely not as good. Later, they did add, in this car's life cycle, a dual clutch called the S-Tronic, which was a 7-speed dual clutch. And if you don't, for whatever reason, want the manual, you should definitely try to get the S-Tronic, not the R-Tronic. We're running the factory setup. This car is basically stock with the exception of an exhaust. It's running on 19-inch wheels all the way around, 305s in the rear, Pirelli P0s, 235s up front. Go ahead and pop the engine bay real quick. All right, so here it is, this glorious naturally aspirated V8. Like I mentioned earlier, it's about 420 horsepower. Later in its life cycle, it got upgraded to about 430 horsepower, and it revs to over 8,000 RPM, 8,200 or 8,500, depending on who you listen to, or you could just take it all the way to redline and see where it starts to bounce off the rev limiter. Next, we'll go ahead and show you guys the front trunk. There's just a little button right here, or you can use the key fob. Then to open it up, you have a little lever right underneath the Audi logo. Lift up, and you get a decent amount of space. It's not as big as, say, something like a C8 Corvette or a 911, but it's not as bad as people love to make it out to be. You can easily fit a full-size backpack or a duffel bag in here, both of those together, you know, weekend bags, if you will, or maybe a medium-sized suitcase. Plus, you do get a little bit of extra storage inside. So now, let's go ahead and hop in. Okay, so let's go ahead and get it started up. We have the actual key, which is a actual key, and go ahead and get this thing started. Everything kind of comes on, and that V8 fires right up. All right, so I'll give you guys just a little bit of revs on the inside here. Just kind of, yes, it is already warmed up, as you guys can see from the dials. It sounds nuts. Before we get started with the driving portion, what I wanted to do is just kind of give you guys a brief overview of the interior of the car. So first thing I want to talk about is the room you have in here. Again, this is a 2-seat mid-engine car. It's a small vehicle. You know, it's not like it's super massive, but the space in here is very good. You have plenty of room width-wise. You have plenty of headroom. I'm not the biggest dude in the world, yet I have plenty of room in here. Also, I had my pop sit in this seat the other day, and he's about 6 foot, 6'1", whereas I'm about 5'9", and he still had plenty of headroom. The visibility is fantastic. You get plenty of window, plenty of glass all around. Visibility out of the back is also very good. The spoiler kind of blocks a little bit of the view, but I'd say maybe about 20% of it, but you can obviously fold that down under about 65 miles an hour. But again, visibility is great. Space is very good. It feels much more spacious than, say, a C8 Corvette. You feel like you have a lot more elbow room, headroom. Doesn't feel as cocooned. It feels very nice and open in here. There's also a little parcel shelf, as you guys can see. I got my camera bag right back here, so you can fit a bag depending on how far you have these seats, you know, kind of forward or back. You can fit a decent amount of stuff back here. I could fit 2 of these back here if I just adjusted the seat a little bit all the way over and on each side. So good amount of space back here, plus you can also use the front trunk. Now, driving position is also fantastic. You can adjust the wheel, it adjusts telescoping, it also goes up and down. It's a very adjustable car, and you can get the seating position really good. And again, you sit very low, but you have great visibility. Dials look really good. As you guys can see here, speedometer goes all the way up to 220, even though the top speed of this particular car is about 186 miles an hour. It also has automatic wipers. Now, this is the only real part of the car where you feel like it's gonna get pretty old. everything else in here feels and looks relatively modern, except for this screen, which initially I thought, oh, you know, maybe I'll upgrade that to Apple CarPlay. But honestly, you can just get yourself a little mount like I have here, and you can just do that, and then boom, you can have your navigation on, and you don't have to mess with this, and it's super easy just to take on and off, and you can remove that if you want. Next, obviously down here, we've got these nice little knurled aluminum dials for your climate control, heated seats, the fabulous gated manual, which one thing that's fun about this is when it's really cold outside, this is going to be really cold, and when it's hot, this is going to be relatively warm. I personally like that. I know some people, that's kind of weird. You also get your buttons down here for your suspension, traction control, your hazards, your spoiler, and then this blank little switch would be for if the car was optioned with parking sensors. This particular car was not. Then you get a little bit of storage here for change, your cigarette lighter, power outlet, whatever you want to call it, 2 cup holders, and a nice little glove box. Oop, getting some Instagram notifications. Nice little center console here, which can fit a phone if you want to put it in there. It's kind of hard to see, I'm sure, but it'll fit. But anything bigger than, say, an iPhone 13 Pro, 14 Pro, not the Max version, anything like that will fit in here. And you do get an aux cord, so you can still plug your phone in and listen to music, as well as a 6-disc CD changer. Now, let's go ahead, go for a drive. First thing you're going to notice when you start driving off in this thing is the clutch. Now, the clutch in this car, it's a single mass flywheel, not a dual mass flywheel. And so what that means is it gives you a very good, it's very precise. You can feel the engagement point in this thing. However, if you're not smooth with it, you're gonna know immediately. Now that might sound like most clutches, but this one's very apparent. You'll definitely feel it. Next is the steering in this car. You know, that's one of the things that kind of struck me first is it doesn't feel, there are a lot of cars nowadays, and again, this is an older car, that just feel overly assisted. This is one of those cars that doesn't feel that way. It feels very organic, very natural feeling. You get plenty of weight at, you know, at low speeds. It's definitely not super light by any means, like, again, compared to, say, something like a C8 Corvette. You could put that Corvette in tour mode, take your pinky, and just kind of go full lock to lock, whereas this is, I mean, it's got some weight to it when you're not moving. Personally, I really like it. It just feels very natural. It's the closest steering that I've felt to, say, a 2001 Mazda Miata, which for me personally was the best steering that I've had in a vehicle. The next thing you're going to notice is the throttle response. We'll touch on this more in a little bit, but it's very crisp, it's very accurate. You're going to get no more or no less than what you want to put in. Give you guys a little acceleration here. Alright, so the next thing that we should talk about is let's talk briefly about ride quality. So when this car was from the factory, it had adjustable suspension. You have it in normal mode, and then you can press it and it'll stiffen everything up. In normal mode, it's actually very comfortable. Now, compared to some of the more modern cars, you know, it's definitely a bit more sporty, and you can feel that it's a bit more purposeful than, say, for example, I'm going to keep using this as a reference because it's the only other mid-engine car that I have personally owned and spent a lot of time with. It's firmer than the C8 Corvette, but it isn't uncomfortable. But you can definitely tell it's a bit more purposeful. It's not as squishy, it's not as soft, but it does ride over bumps really well. It's not as harsh as, say, something like, for example, the Shelby GT350R. It's very easy to live with. It deals with most bumps relatively well. It'll hit a bump, settle itself out, and then that's it. It doesn't sit there and wallow. It also doesn't just hit the bump and then shatter the car to pieces, which is nice. And also another thing that helps this car be relatively comfortable is the seats. As you guys can see here, these seats, they're not aggressively bolstered. They do have some good bolstering, and the bolstering in the driver's seat is actually adjustable. You can kind of make it go wider or looser, I guess, depending on how you want to feel. Speaking of C8s, there's one right there. But these seats are very comfortable. And again, this isn't a track car, right? This is not something that they designed to specifically only do track days in. So the seat needs to be comfortable, and it is, which kind of helps you, you know, go on those longer trips and not get tired. So that way when you get to the nice road that you want to go to, or if you do want to take it on a track day, it does give you a decent amount of bolstering, but it's also not going to beat you up the entire time you're driving. We're gonna hit a tunnel here in just a second, but real quick, let's just kind of give you guys a little bit of some spirited driving, if you will. Yeah, you definitely won't have any issues merging onto the highway in this thing. All right, speaking of the highway, what is this thing like on the highway at speed? So we're doing about 70 miles an hour right now. It's also raining, which is great. And I'm also on a road that is absolutely awful. It is super bad, but with the suspension in normal mode, it rides relatively well. Honestly, it's actually better than relatively well. It's really comfortable. You do get a decent amount of road noise just because you're so low to the ground. You're gonna hear kind of the different breaks in the concrete and things like that. You know, it's not gonna be this super quiet the same way as if you hopped in, say, an Audi RSQ8 or something like that, or a Raptor driving over a road like this. So you do get a little bit of noise, but you can easily at 70, 75 miles an hour have a conversation with the person next to you, and it isn't going to be, you know, like driving the Bronco at 75 or 80 miles an hour. Now this particular car does have an exhaust on it, and for the life of me I cannot figure out what brand it is, but you get a little bit, as you guys can hear. I'm sure the road is just awful, but I haven't been able to figure out what brand the exhaust is. It's just, you know, I can't figure it out. But it's got a little bit of drone, but it also sounds amazing. And overall on the highway, again, you can cruise on this thing, because the day I picked it up, we drove it back about a 4-hour drive, and it was super comfortable the entire way. Just to give you guys an idea, that was a 4-hour drive, and my cousin Austin fell asleep, whereas on the 16-hour drive home in my Shelby, Austin never fell asleep one time, because that's how uncomfortable that car was compared to this. So you can do long drives in this. You're not going to have to worry about, oh, am I going to be uncomfortable? Because again, the seats are comfortable, and at highway speeds, it isn't overly loud, it isn't overly harsh. The ride is relatively supple, and so it's very easy to drive at highway speeds. What's also nice about this car is the gearing. So, you know, a lot of cars nowadays, they have basically 2 or even 3 overdrive gears, to where they're just gears to get fuel economy. They're just highway gears. This car, 6th gear is top speed. Like, that's where you're gonna hit your 186 miles an hour. It's not a cruising gear. As you guys can see right now, doing 65, 67 miles an hour, we're almost at 3,000 RPM. So if you want to accelerate in 6th gear, put your foot down a little bit, and you start to accelerate. Because of that gearing, it doesn't feel like it's super sluggish underneath, say, 3,000 RPM. You know, like right now, we're sitting about 2,500. I dip my foot in 5th gear. We immediately start picking up the pace and moving forward. Whereas, say, something like the Shelby GT350 was not the case like that. It was definitely under 3,500 RPM. It felt pretty sluggish, and you guys can see here, even in the wet, going around this roundabout here, you get plenty of traction. All right, there we go. traction control lighting up there because it definitely was struggling for grip. And again, because this thing only puts 30% to the front, so it isn't, you know, like a true four-wheel drive system or all-wheel drive system. You know, it only puts a little bit at the front. Sport suspension with an exclamation point, and see how that feels. I mean, the chassis rigidity in this thing is just unreal. I mean, the chassis rigidity reminds me of kind of the Camaro 1LE. It just feels so rigid. You don't feel any play in anything, and it gives you a lot of confidence to really push the car hard. I very rarely have the car in sport mode just because on normal roads it is a little rough. But when you're really pushing on in those corners, it feels awesome. And like I mentioned earlier, guys, like the gearing in this thing allows this car to feel a lot faster than any 400 horsepower car has the right to feel. It feels really fast. It feels no slower than any of the other cars that I've driven. I mean, you can just feel there's just no understeer, even in the wet. And so what's great about that is, you know, this car only makes 420 horsepower. Only. My 1LE Camaro made more horsepower and way more torque than that. The Shelby made 100 more horsepower than that. And my Corvette obviously made more horsepower and more torque. Yet, from 60 onwards, this feels much faster than the Corvette does. 0 to 60, obviously, a bit of a different story just because this is a manual. The Corvette only available in a dual clutch. So that's one of the reasons why. But after 60, this definitely feels faster. It feels faster than the Camaro, and it also feels just as fast as the Shelby. And a lot of that is down to the gearing and the fact that, for example, this car weighs about 3,400 pounds, which is about 300 pounds less than the Shelby, and about 150 to 200 pounds lighter than the Corvette. So this all-wheel drive Audi with full power seats, heated seats, and all that stuff, and automatic wipers is, you know, a couple 100 pounds lighter than some of those cars, which is pretty impressive. We'll do like a first gear pull, I guess, but like I said, it is going to definitely spin. All right, so 3, 2, 1, here we go. I mean, it screams. Oh, it's so awesome. I mean, it just sounds like a finely tuned race engine V8. It is so awesome. What are some of the downsides of this car? Downsides are, if we're just going to talk about the car itself, dynamically, I'd say the brakes just don't seem to match the rest of the car. Potentially just kind of fade pretty quickly. They just don't give you a whole lot of crazy stopping power. That's definitely one of the areas where this car kind of feels a little lackluster. Obviously there's the tech aspect of this, but I mean, it really hasn't been that big of a deal. Like I said, you can still plug your phone up, listen to music. The Bang & Olufsen sound system is actually really good. You still get volume controls here on the steering wheel. You know, you get automatic climate control, cruise control, right? It's not like it's that bad. And later models even had backup cameras, and certain models had parking sensors, so it isn't that bad. It's just the infotainment, which again, I thought that was going to be something that I was going to want to get rid of immediately, but that hasn't been the case. Oh man. What are some of this car's kind of competitors? What could you be looking at for the price that you can pick up a nice clean one of these? And for me, I was looking at these cars, which was a rear-wheel drive new F-Type. Now obviously that car doesn't come with a manual, whereas this one you can have in a manual, obviously, and it is fantastic. Every single shift you do is so precise, it's so direct, and it just gives you that satisfying feeling. It's like a bolt action rifle, just the noises that it makes, just, I mean, it's just awesome. Obviously, the one that I've made quite a few comparisons to this video has been the C8 Corvette, which obviously has a faster 0 to 60 time, has more modern tech, you know, things like that. But again, no manual, and you see them a lot more than you see these. This is a car that you just don't see that many of. And again, this car is just, it's more of a sports car and more sporting oriented, more dynamic than the Corvette is. The Corvette is a little softer. This is a little sharper than that car. I ended up going with this simply because I think it's a very classy looking car. You just don't see a lot of them. It was a dream car for me personally. And who doesn't want a gated manual in their life? All right, guys, so we're now back, and I am now, since it's rained, I'm now going to spray the car off and get it back to being clean. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys, you know, enjoyed the sounds of the car and the gated shifts. I hope you maybe got a better feel for what it's like to drive one of these. Obviously, I'm not an automotive journalist, so I'm not necessarily going to convey it the best way, but I just try to give you guys a little bit of an insight. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to give it a like and subscribe for more videos, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.